again, we have been the largest supporter of Ukraine's right and ability to defend itself and repel the Russians' attack from its borders, just as we are supporting Israel's right to defend itself from the terrorist attacks. So I get that you continue to push for this one thing that you think would be the magical thing that we are doing that we're not now, but I would take a look at all of the billions of dollars of arms that we have provided to Ukraine that have had some pretty decisive impacts on the battlefield if you want to see the strength of our commitment.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, the question is that, why is it that Israel has the right to fight back outside of its border that Ukraine doesn't have by using the U.S. weapons?
Ukraine has the right to make those decisions for itself. I don't have any, I think it's a little bit of a false comparison.
Come back to me later on.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yesterday, an Israeli airstrike hit the Turkish-Palestinian Friendship Hospital for cancer patients in Gaza. The Turkish government condemned the attack, saying that it was carried out despite all necessary information, including the hospital's coordinates being shared with Israeli authorities. Do you have anything to say on that? And does the U.S. believe an hospital can be a legitimate military target? And do you think such actions are in line with the laws of war?
So again, I'm not going to comment on individual strikes from this podium, but as I said yesterday, hospitals are important pieces of civilian infrastructure that deserve to be protected.
Yeah, thank you, Matthew. I'm going back to the Houthis fire missiles to the Israel. You said multiple times, even the president said that, do not do that, but they are doing that. Do you think that they are joining the conflict or not?
Again, I'm not going to make an assessment about that from here, and Israel can make its own assessments about a conflict with Israel. I will just reiterate what our policy has been, which is that anyone that's thinking about joining this conflict should not do it.
And do you have any red lines for the Iranian-backed groups because they are attacking you every day?
Again, we have made clear that the United States reserves the right to defend its interests, defend its personnel, and will defend its interests and defend its personnel. But I do start to chuckle when I oftentimes hear people here asking me to announce strikes from this podium before they've happened or preview actions that we might take. The Secretary Austin got pushed to do the same thing on the Hill. Secretary Austin made quite clear today, we'll respond if we choose to at a time and place of our choosing. And I think for any number of reasons, I ought to leave it at that and not preview any actions we may or may not take publicly from the State Department podium.
One last question. You're saying that the attacks on your forces by Iranian-backed groups is a separate things with the conflict between Israel and Hamas. Why do you think that? Because they are saying that we are attacking the U.S. forces because their involvement into this conflict.
They can make whatever claims they want about why they are taking their actions. We have made clear that the responses that we have taken are separate and apart from the conflict between Israel and Hamas.
Right.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, Matt. Just a brief preface to a couple of questions here. There's a lot of reporting in the media that mentions occupied territories, so I want to clarify for our audience, Matt, how these lands become occupied since the UN Resolution 181 gave the land to Arabs, not Palestinians. How did these lands that were never given by the United Nations to Palestinian Arabs become occupied Palestinian land? And whom did this land belong prior to what you claim that Israel became the occupier of? And just a brief follow-up.
I don't think I'm going to get into doing history lessons from here, just as a general rule.
Okay.
I will say that we believe, again, that the ultimate resolution for peace between Israel and the Palestinian people is a two-state solution along 1967 borders with mutually agreed swaps.
Okay, just finally, does the State Department agree with the Turkish President Erdogan that Israel is the occupier of their ancestral land?
I'm not going to comment on comments made by the president of Turkey, but our position on the status of lands in Israel and what the policy ought to be has been clear for some time. Go ahead.
Thank you.
American Europeans are demanding free, fair, and participatory election in Bangladesh. And current ruler, Hasina Sheikh, is holding the power since 2009. Does America aware that due to the Indian influence, due to the Indian direct and indirect support for Awami League and Hasina Sheikh, there is logical and impossible for Bangladeshi people to have a voting right and have a free, fair, and participatory election, number one. And I have a second question is, Hasina Sheikh held a press conference last night. At the conference, she made some inflammatory and derogatory comments which is concerning the security of US Ambassador, His Excellency Peter Haas. Very few people in the world understand the body language and mockery of Hasina Sheikh. She did the same thing while August 4, 2018, Marsha Barnicket's car came under attack under the direction of same Hasina Sheikh. She is making the same joke and same mockery, sitting down at a press conference and making mockery.
So let me, I think I get the question. Let me just say that we have made clear that we expect the government of Bangladesh, as we expect every government, to comply with their obligations under the Vienna Conventions for the safe protection of diplomats. And with respect to your first question, as I've said before, as I said yesterday, the holding of free and fair elections is the responsibility of everyone, all political parties, voters, government, civil society, and the media. And what we want in Bangladesh is the same thing the Bangladeshi people want, which are free and fair elections conducted in a peaceful manner. Go ahead. I'm going to move.
Thank you, Matt. Bangladesh ruling Prime Minister responded U.S. Ambassador Peter Hirsch call on dialogue between the ruling party and opposition by Prime Minister by saying that she will have dialogue with the opposition if the U.S. President Joe Biden does the same dialogue with the former U.S. President Donald Trump. Then she might think about this dialogue, and she refused to hold any dialogue between the political parties. And her administration very much attacking on the opposition. Today, 2 opposition leaders killed by the police gunfire, and they are arresting already 2 top leaders arrested in Dhaka. So every day they are arresting opposition leaders and activists. So how could you believe that there will be an election?
So I won't have any comment on the first part of your question other than to say that the goals I outlined before for free and fair elections, we do believe that dialogue is important to achieving those goals. With respect to your second question, we are closely monitoring the electoral environment in Bangladesh leading up to January's election, and we take incidents of violence very seriously. We are engaging and will continue to engage with the government, with opposition, with civil society, and other stakeholders to urge them to work together for the benefit of the Bangladeshi people to ensure free and fair elections that are conducted in a peaceful manner.
Thanks, Matthew.
Neighboring country, since we're in the region. You had some sanctions on Myanmar today that target the oil and gas state enterprise. Just wondering, those sanctions were specifically looking at financial services provided to the MOGE, the state oil and gas company. Why not do full blocking sanctions on MOGE, put it on the SDN list, and prevent as you say, this is a huge source of revenue for the Myanmar military junta. Why not just use full sanctions?
So we believe that the actions we took today were important to maximize concerted pressure on the military regime to change course. They built on our previous sanctions, but with respect to specific sanctions decisions, I'd refer you to the Department of Treasury.
And this is, Chevron did have a relationship with U.S. company. Chevron had a relationship with this state enterprise. That relationship no longer exists, and you finally do the sanctions that have been called for a while. Is there, if people were going to ask the question of, why didn't the U.S. do this earlier when you perhaps had more leverage over them? What's the response?
Again, I'd refer you to the Department of Treasury for a response on that.
Sure.
Go ahead.
Thanks, Matthew. What's the State Department's stance on the House bill to provide supplemental funding to Israel? Does the GOP wanting to strip IRS funding from the Inflation Reduction Act, a non-starter for Democrats, make it harder to get supplemental assistance to Israel?
So I will let others in the government speak to specific legislative packages, or first and foremost the White House. But I will say that our goal is what the Secretary testified to this morning, which is to achieve full funding for Ukraine in its battle against Russian aggression, and full funding for Israel to help it defend itself against the terrorist attacks from Hamas, as well as to provide humanitarian assistance to the innocent civilians in Gaza who are party to this conflict through no fault of their own, as well as the other pieces in the bill. But in terms of specific legislative tactics, I'm going to let the White House speak to that.
Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib criticized the administration's response to the Hamas attack, claiming that the Biden administration is on the wrong side of history. Does the State Department have any response? Does it have any concerns about the growing domestic opposition?
So I'm not going to speak to specific comments by a member of Congress. I will say that we stand by our policy. We stand by both of the things we have done, which is number one, to ensure that Israel has what it needs to defend itself. They suffered a brutal terrorist attack and have the right and the obligation to defend themselves as any country would. And two, our intense and ongoing work to get humanitarian assistance into innocent civilians in Gaza.
And finally, is there anything you can share with us regarding what happened with the Houthis?
No.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
I'll be very short. I have two short questions following about Bangladesh. The opposition BNP Jamaat alliance unleashed mayhem across the country. The opposition BNP has announced a new program of blockade of road, railways across the country, which has created fears for further violence. People of the country believe that the BNP has chosen the path of violence to foil the upcoming general election. Will you slap visa sanctions on the bad actors so that they are killing the police officers and they vandalize the residence of the Chief Justice?
As you know, because as you know, because I've said this before, we don't announce visa or any other sanctions before we make them. But we continue to support a free and fair election in Bangladesh and believe it should be conducted peacefully. Alex,
and I'm
going to move to Alex.
Just one.
I'm going to pick. Alex, go ahead.
Should the region to NATO, if possible? As you know, NATO foreign ministers will gather on November 28th. Is it your hope that Sweden will be there?
We want Sweden to be approved to enter NATO as soon as possible. I won't put a timeline on it other than to say we want it to happen as quickly as possible.
How frustrated are you that it's taking longer? Secretary had a conversation with his Turkish counterpart, and Hungary also appears to have its own new demands.
I won't say we're frustrated. I'll say that we want them to be approved as soon as possible, but it's something that we have spent a good amount of time working on. We have welcomed the announcement by the president of Turkey that Sweden's accession would move through the Turkish parliament. We're watching that very closely and hoping it gets approved as soon as possible. And we have also noted the comments from Hungary from that they would ultimately support it as well, and we expect them to do so.
My final question, if you don't mind, on Azerbaijan. Yesterday marked International Day of Political Prisoners. We just had talks in Baku at the Deputy Secretary level. I'm just wondering if you guys managed to raise the case of Gubat Ibadoglu and others. Gubat's family reached out to the Congress members, and there was a letter to the Secretary from the Hill 2 weeks ago. Anything you guys could have done that you haven't done yet?
So we are continue to be troubled by the arrest and detention of Gubat Ibadoglu, and we are alarmed by the reports that his health continues to deteriorate. We have urged the Azerbaijani government on a number of occasions to immediately release him. We urge Azerbaijan to protect the human rights and fundamental freedoms of all, consistent with its own constitution and international obligations and commitments, and we have made that clear both publicly and privately. Michelle and then Jen, and we'll wrap up.
On Gaza, why doesn't the U.S. support a ceasefire in Gaza?
I have spoken to this a number of occasions. We believe a ceasefire would allow Hamas to continue to arm itself and continue to launch terrorist attacks against Israel. I don't think you can count on Hamas. I think when people call for a ceasefire, they're calling for Israel to stop firing. I don't think there's anyone that actually expects that Hamas would agree to a ceasefire, a terrorist organization. That said, we have made it very clear that humanitarian pauses, either to allow hostages to come out or to allow humanitarian aid to come in, would be something that would be appropriate. Jen, and then we'll wrap up.
Readout of the Secretary's meeting with the new Speaker of the House. Was it productive?
I do. I won't characterize it other than to say that it was an introductory meeting. It was the first time the Secretary had a chance to meet with the Speaker. He talked to them about a number of things, most importantly, the President's request for supplemental assistance to support Ukraine and to support Israel and to get humanitarian assistance into Gaza and into other areas. And he had the chance to talk to him about his recent diplomatic engagements in the region and how we see and what our primary diplomatic goals in terms of securing the release of hostages, getting American citizens out, and preventing the conflict from widening.
Well, you wouldn't say it was productive.
I haven't gotten a detailed. I haven't gotten the Secretary's characterization of the meeting, so without getting that, I'm reluctant. And I was up here getting ready to come talk to you all, so I was not in the meeting myself.
There's been a lawsuit filed against the State Department and the Secretary on behalf of some Americans who are trapped in Gaza. Are you aware of this? Do you have any comment on that?
So we never comment on litigation. I'd refer it to the Justice Department. I will just say that everyone here at the State Department has no higher priority than getting those American citizens out of Gaza, getting them out as soon as possible. The president, it has been something the president has focused on and has spent real time and effort on and raising with his counterparts in the region. And as I said, the secretary has been on the phone and conducted meetings about this when we were in the region. We continue to do everything we can to get these American citizens out. It's been a difficult process for some of the reasons I've gone into in previous days, when you have Hamas controlling one side of the border and just not being willing to let anyone go. That said, we continue to work on it. We have made progress, and I hope that we can get them out in the coming days.
Sorry, is Satterfield still in Egypt?
I don't remember where exactly he is. I maybe should get a body tracker on him. I don't have one, but I know he's been moving around the region quite a bit. I don't know where he is. I think it's about almost 8 o'clock at night there now. So,
do you mind if I just do something completely separate? Venezuela.
Sure.
I know you had some reaction on this yesterday, but the Supreme Court of Venezuela saying it's invalidating the opposition primary. This, of course, comes just days after the arrangement around announced by the United States that would ease some of the sanctions on Venezuela. What's your level of concern about this? Do you think this can be reversed? Has there been any discussions with the authorities in Caracas?
So I will just reiterate what the Secretary said on the Hill today in an answer to this question, which is Venezuela made commitments as a part of the political roadmap that it signed. We expect them to uphold those commitments, and if they do not meet those commitments under the electoral roadmap, we have the ability to take steps. We have the ability to take steps of our own. I don't want to announce what those would be. I'll leave it at this point that we expect them to uphold their commitments. I'll leave it at that. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.